KSI versus Jake Paul. There's been a lot of talk recently that this fight is bigger than Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk too. What are your thoughts?
Mm.
And if you agree with that, why?
It's a tough one. You're putting me in some hard spots, which I appreciate. Is Jake Paul versus KSI bigger than Fury versus Usyk? I think that to a certain demographic, it is. To a certain percentage of the fan base, and obviously all the crossover fans, it's the biggest fight in the world. It's the biggest fight that could ever be made. Jake Paul and KSI. That's the end game for crossover fans. I think if you took a step back and looked at the forest for the trees, if you were to compare just fans of combat sports overall, they would probably lean more so to Fury versus Usyk. I just think that has, I don't want to say broader or wider appeal because I do believe Jake Paul and KSI attracts, I mean, so many fans. But it's tight. I think I'd lean Fury Usyk though in terms of which one's more popular in a broader sense.
I think it's fair to say that boxing and influencer boxing, you could almost categorize them as two separate sports and two separate, fan bases, like you mentioned there as well. So for
Mhm.
those two fights, it's almost like comparing Super Bowl to WrestleMania. They're going to have two different fan bases, so you're not going to get that accurate sort of siding on that. But in terms of numbers, bums on the seats, the gate, the pay-per-views, whatever it may be, which one do you think generates more money at those two fights?
Mm. It's an interesting question. I think that it becomes a bit murkier following Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, where you see record breaking gates and 77,000 people, 118 million viewers worldwide. If KSI and Jake Paul fought on Netflix, for instance, in a venue like Wembley, where you could see those same ticket sales, which I would anticipate it would generate, then it is hard to say. It is hard to say which one would make more money. I think before the Mike Tyson fight, it's an easy answer. Oh, absolutely, it's Fury and Usyk, but it's impossible to deny the numbers, right? Numbers don't lie, and Paul generates. And so you put him against his biggest rival in a venue that would be more favorable towards the fan base. I could absolutely see Jake Paul and KSI doing at least the same amount as Fury Usyk, right? I think that within the right conditions, you can generate the same amount of money from both.
Could you see KSI and Jake being a trilogy, one in the UK, one in the US, and throw one out in Saudi for good measure? Could you see
Mm.
that happening between the two?
I hope. I mean, when you think about how long they've been building this fight up, you would want maybe more than one serving of it. I think that's entirely plausible. The issue is, right, you look at how long it's taken for them to even approach conversations. They're still miles away, right? So I think getting them to fight once has been hard enough. Getting them to do it two other times, geez Louise. I mean, we haven't even gotten him in the ring, right? So I think depending on how the first fight goes will tell us a lot about whether or not this will be a rivalry and a trilogy in a competitive in-ring sense. I would love to see it. I think that they have such a great rivalry, and it sells like hotcakes that only doing it once might be a disservice. But at the same time, if Jake Paul goes out there and walks right through JJ, then you have to look at it and go, well, what grounds do we have to make a rematch? Honestly, I think if KSI goes out there, knocks Jake Paul out, I think a lot more people would be like, hey, lucky shot, let's run it back a second time. But if Jake Paul is able to be successful in there, I think a lot of people would be like, close that chapter, move on.